Some people will try to sell anything to make a quick buck, but these 45 people took it to an absurd extreme, attempting to sell things so stupid, worthless, or bizarre that everyone wondered what they were thinking. Here are the dumbest things people actually tried to sell. 1. Someone tried to sell used air from their house for $100 per jar. After deciding anything could be sold, this person grabbed empty jars from the store and filled them with air from inside the house. Each jar was carefully sealed and listed online for $100. The listing claimed this was genuine house air with special properties. According to the seller, the house had good energy that infused the air with positive qualities. People laughed at the listing, and comments mocked the idea relentlessly. But the seller insisted people didn't understand value, arguing that air quality matters and this was premium, carefully curated air from a happy home. When people pointed out that air is free everywhere, the response was that location matters, and this particular air was special. The price dropped to $50 when nobody bought, but sales remained at zero. Marketing efforts shifted to calling it collectible and artisanal, which only brought more mockery. Social media posts attempted to go viral, and the listing did go viral, as a joke that people shared for comedy. Mistaking this for genuine interest, the seller raised the price back to $100, claiming demand was high. A website was created for $200 to professionalize the operation. Shipping costs were added to make it seem more legitimate. 0 jars sold despite all efforts. Local markets were tried next, where vendors laughed and asked the seller to leave. Friends suggested abandoning the idea, but stubbornness prevailed. After spending $50 on jars and $200 on the website, the final tally was $0 in revenue. 50 jars of sealed air sat around the house collecting dust before eventually being thrown away in frustration. The stupidity was trying to sell air for $100 per jar, insisting it was special, spending $250 on the venture, making 0 sales, being mocked online, and never admitting defeat. 2. A person tried to sell a half-eaten sandwich for $500 because a celebrity might have looked at it. While eating at a restaurant, this person noticed a celebrity dining nearby at another table. After consuming half the sandwich, a business idea emerged. This sandwich could be valuable because the celebrity might have glanced at it during their meal. Photos were taken of both the sandwich and the celebrity in the background to document the proximity. The online listing described it as a celebrity-adjacent sandwich, noting the famous person was approximately 15 feet away at their closest point. When asked if the celebrity had touched the sandwich, the seller admitted no contact occurred whatsoever. Questions about whether the celebrity even noticed it received the answer, probably at some point. People explained that proximity to fame doesn't create value in food items, but the seller compared it to celebrity homes, which are valuable real estate. The comparison didn't land. Everyone agreed homes are fundamentally different from sandwiches. Searches for collectors of celebrity-adjacent food items turned up absolutely nothing. As the sandwich began rotting after several days, new photos documented its decay with visible mold. The listing now displayed a decomposing sandwich, still priced at $500 without adjustment. The seller claimed it was aging like fine wine, which made no scientific sense. Platform removal followed multiple reports of disgusting content violating terms of service. Other platforms removed it immediately upon listing. Local sale attempts failed when nobody agreed to meet up for the transaction. The rotting sandwich ended up being eaten by the seller in a moment of poor judgment, resulting in severe food poisoning and an $800 hospital bill for treatment. Total investment: $50 for the original sandwich. Total revenue: $0. Net loss, including medical bills, $850. The stupidity was trying to sell a half-eaten sandwich for $500 because a celebrity might have looked at it, letting it rot for days, eating it anyway, getting food poisoning, paying $800 in medical bills, and making no money. 3. Someone tried to sell individual grains of rice for $1 each as artisanal rice. Looking at rice in the pantry, this person decided each grain deserved individual sale as a premium product. Careful counting separated 1,000 grains, each placed in its own tiny plastic bag with a seal. The listing price was $1 per grain, described as artisanal individual rice, with each grain personally hand-selected. Questions about what made them artisanal received the answer that personal selection mattered. The seller personally chose each grain, carefully rejecting imperfect ones based on appearance. People pointed out that regular rice costs $5 for thousands of grains at any grocery store, but the seller insisted convenience didn't matter when quality was paramount. Cooking instructions requested by potential buyers received the response: cook normally 1 grain at a time if desired. This raised the obvious question of why anyone wouldn't just buy normal rice, which was met with insistence that this rice was special and gourmet quality. Food bloggers discovered the listing and mocked it extensively, causing it to go viral across social media. Interviews were given to blogs, with the seller explaining the vision behind artisanal individual rice grains in detail. What the seller didn't realize was that bloggers published these interviews as satire to entertain readers. The price increased to $2 per grain after the publicity, under the theory that media attention increased value significantly. 0 grains sold at either price point. Bundling was attempted, 10 grains for $15, which also failed to attract any buyers. Hours of packaging work combined with $50 spent on tiny bags yielded 0 revenue. 1,000 bags of individual rice grains sat unused, and the rice itself was now wasted since it couldn't be cooked in its packaged state. Family members mocked the endeavor. Friends stopped taking the seller seriously. The stupidity was trying to sell individual grains of rice for $1 each, claiming they were artisanal, spending hours packaging them, spending $50 on materials, giving interviews that mocked them, raising the price when it went viral, and making no sales. 4. A person tried to sell authentic screenshots of their computer screen for $50 each. Screenshots of mundane computer activities were captured and printed on high-quality photo paper for presentation. $50 price tags were attached to each one with professional-looking labels. The listing described them as authentic screenshots that were highly collectible and culturally significant. When people asked why anyone would purchase screenshots, the seller explained these documented important historical moments in digital life. Pressed for details about what moments, the answer was checking email, browsing the internet, and shopping online. People pointed out these weren't important or historically significant, but the seller insisted future historians would care about preserving digital history from this era. The obvious counter-argument was that anyone can take screenshots of anything, which was met with claims that these particular ones were authenticated through signatures on the back. This authentication method was called meaningless by everyone. Comparisons to autographed photos fell flat when people explained photos capture unique moments, while screenshots are infinite. Claims that screenshots were digital art were rejected by actual artists. 100 mundane screenshots were listed, showing activities like reading emails about spam and checking weather forecasts. 0 sold at any point. The price dropped to $25 in hopes of attracting budget collectors without improving sales. Framing some seemed like a good idea to increase perceived value, costing $30 per frame. 10 screenshots were professionally framed in nice frames. Still nothing sold despite the upgraded presentation. Local art show applications were rejected with explanations that this wasn't art. Online art marketplace submissions met the same fate with similar feedback. Total spending reached $400 on printing and framing costs. Revenue remained at $0. Framed screenshots of checking email now decorated the seller's house as a constant reminder. The stupidity was trying to sell screenshots for $50 each, comparing them to autographed photos, spending $400 on printing and framing, being rejected from art shows, and selling nothing. 5. Someone tried to sell dirt from their backyard for $20 per pound, claiming it had healing properties. Digging up the backyard with a shovel produced bags and bags of dirt, each carefully weighed and priced at $20 per pound. The listing claimed healing properties from minerals naturally occurring in the soil. Questions about which specific minerals went unanswered. The seller didn't know exactly which ones, but insisted they were there. Requests for laboratory testing were denied because apparently testing would ruin the spiritual energy contained within the dirt. Further questions about what spiritual energy meant were met with vague explanations about earth vibrations. People stated the obvious. Dirt is dirt regardless of where it comes from. But the seller insisted this particular dirt was special, claiming ancient civilizations valued dirt for healing, which isn't historically accurate. When people pointed out that eating dirt is a disorder called pica, The seller argued it was actually natural medicine used for centuries. Health authorities issued warnings about selling dirt for consumption that were completely ignored. Sales continued despite the warnings, though nobody actually bought any at the high price. The price dropped to $10 per pound without improving results whatsoever. Fake testimonials were created to boost credibility, featuring made-up names and healing stories. But people quickly noticed these were fabricated when the details didn't make sense. Being caught lying publicly didn't help the business prospects. 100 pounds of bagged dirt sat unsold in the garage after $30 was spent on bags. The backyard now had holes everywhere from the digging, causing the grass to die in patches. Fixing the yard properly cost $500 in landscaping and grass seed. Revenue from dirt sales, $0. Net loss, $530. The stupidity was trying to sell backyard dirt for $20 per pound, claiming healing properties, creating fake testimonials, ignoring health warnings, paying $500 to fix the yard, and making no sales. 6. A person tried to sell lucky pennies for $100 each because they found them heads up. Finding pennies on the ground that happened to be heads up sparked a business idea based on superstition. 50 pennies were collected over several weeks from sidewalks and parking lots, then listed for $100 each. The listing guaranteed these were lucky pennies, with the proof being that finding them heads up demonstrated their inherent luck. People pointed out pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, but the seller insisted luck was priceless and couldn't be quantified. Requests for proof of luck resulted in circular logic. The proof was that the pennies were found at all, which proved they were lucky. Arguments about superstition having monetary value compared the pennies to four-leaf clovers, but people noted that clovers are actually rare in nature. The claim that heads-up pennies are rare was debunked with basic probability. 50% of all pennies are heads-up at any given time. Insistence that these specific pennies were special and contained palpable energy brought extensive online mockery from skeptics. The price increased to $150 per penny, with the seller claiming mockery proved the established luck industries feared this competition. When people pointed out no such industries exist, certificates of authenticity were printed for each penny at a cost of $20 total. Sales remained at zero despite the certificates. A price drop to $50 per penny didn't help the situation. Flea market booths were set up on weekends where people openly laughed at the concept of paying for found pennies. Public embarrassment followed as vendors nearby mocked the booth. 50 pennies originally listed for $100, then $50, each worth 1 cent, generated zero revenue after $20 was spent on certificates. The pennies were eventually just spent at face value for coffee and parking meters. The stupidity was trying to sell pennies for $100 each because they were heads up, insisting they were lucky, printing certificates, being laughed at flea markets, and selling nothing. 7. A person tried to sell a rock that looked like another rock for $1,000. An ordinary rock found outside apparently resembled another rock, which seemed marketable for conceptual art purposes. Photos from every angle were taken, including detailed close-ups showing texture. The listing price was set at $1,000 for this rare rock-resembling rock. Complete bafflement followed from potential buyers who couldn't understand the concept. Questions about what made it special received the answer. It looks like a rock, which is the entire point. People pointed out all rocks look like rocks by definition, but the seller insisted this one was special. The resemblance was uncanny and meta. Pressed to explain what it resembled specifically, the answer was a generic rock, which people noted as just a rock being a rock. Arguments that it was profound meta-commentary were rejected, with people saying it was simply a rock with no artistic value. Insistence that art collectors would understand the depth framed it as conceptual philosophical art exploring existence. Art critics who reviewed it confirmed in writing, "It's a rock, nothing more." Claims that critics didn't understand the work led to a 500-word artist's statement explaining the rock's significance as a statement on perception. People found the statement pretentious and meaningless, full of art jargon without substance. The price remained firm at $1,000 with absolutely no negotiation offered. Zero offers came in over months of listing. Gallery contacts went unanswered by professionals. The rock sat in the house for months while the listing stayed active online. Investment, time only. Revenue, $0. The rock remains with the seller to this day as a monument to failure. The stupidity was trying to sell a rock for $1,000 because it looked like a rock, calling it conceptual art, writing a 500-word artist statement, and making no sales. 8. A person tried to sell used dental floss claiming it was from a famous person. Used dental floss was listed for $500 as celebrity dental floss, with authentication implied. When asked which celebrity specifically, privacy concerns were cited as preventing disclosure for legal reasons. Requests for proof of authenticity met the same privacy excuse, which people noted was conveniently unprovable. Claims of working in dental care were made to establish credibility, though the location couldn't be shared for legal reasons. People suspected it was just the seller's own used floss being repackaged. Insistence that it was authentic celebrity floss positioned it as a rare collectible for fans. Widespread disgust followed the listing's discovery. Questions about who would want this went unanswered with any logic. Comparisons to celebrity hair as collectible memorabilia didn't work. People said hair is different from dental hygiene products. Arguments that bodily materials are all equivalent as collectibles fell flat with collectors. The listing was reported to the platform and removed for health violations. Attempts on other platforms met immediate removal before gaining traction. In-person sales were attempted at collector conventions, but nobody agreed to meet or negotiate. Social media posts about the listing brought mockery and disgust. The used floss remained unsold in a small bag. Investment, $0 beyond the floss cost. Revenue, $0. Reputation damaged among potential customers. The stupidity was trying to sell used dental floss for $500, claiming it was from a celebrity, refusing to provide proof, being banned from all platforms, and damaging their reputation. 9. Someone tried to sell motivational air by yelling into jars and sealing them for $75 each. Empty jars were purchased specifically for this business venture. Motivational phrases were yelled into them at high volume before being immediately sealed with tight lids. Listing price, $75 each for motivational air captured and preserved. According to the listing, sound waves remained trapped in the air indefinitely, and opening the jar would release motivation into the room. Questions about how this works scientifically received explanations about sound waves staying in the air, which violates physics. Insistence that positive energy stayed trapped in the molecules was called pseudoscience by scientists. Arguments that science didn't understand everything spiritually were countered by people saying customers would feel nothing. Requests for testimonials from satisfied customers revealed there were none. Nobody had bought any yet. The seller noted that early adopters would benefit most from this innovation. 30 jars were created, each with different phrases like success, wealth, and confidence for variety. 0 sold at the original price. The price dropped to $50 without improvement in sales. Demonstrations were attempted where jars were dramatically opened in front of skeptical observers, but observers felt nothing unusual. Claims that people weren't receptive enough to the energy didn't convince anyone. Video demonstrations showed someone yelling into jars, which people found laughable rather than impressive. $40 spent on jars, time spent on videos and marketing, $0 earned, jars eventually broken. The stupidity was trying to sell motivational air for $75 per jar, insisting sound waves stayed trapped, spending $40 on jars, demonstrating them failing publicly, and making no sales. 10. A person tried to sell tap water in bottles for $10 each, calling it raw water. Bottles were filled straight from the kitchen tap without any filtering or treatment process. $10 price tags labeled them raw, unprocessed water with natural purity. Claims of being natural and unprocessed were countered with people pointing out it was literally tap water. Insistence that raw meant better for health conflicted with the fact that tap water is treated for safety reasons. Arguments that treatment removed beneficial properties were questioned. What benefits specifically? The answer was natural minerals that supposedly get removed. But tap water contains minerals, so insistence that this was special because it came from a specific tap made no sense when everyone has taps. Arguments about location mattering and claims of good house water quality were met with requests for testing results. Testing was refused because it would supposedly contaminate the purity of the raw water. Health official warnings about selling untreated water were completely ignored. 3 bottles sold to confused people who subsequently got sick from bacteria in the untreated water. Refund requests were denied, with the seller claiming sickness proved detoxification was occurring. Reports to the health department followed from the sick customers. Investigation revealed multiple health code violations. A $1,000 fine was issued for selling contaminated water. Total sales, $30 from 3 bottles. Net law, $970 after the fine. The seller was banned from selling any water products. The Stupidity was selling tap water as raw water for $10, making people sick, getting fined $1,000, losing $970, and being banned from selling water. 11. Someone tried to sell fingernail clippings as organic keratin supplements for $50 per bag. Months of fingernail clipping collection filled small bags carefully sealed for freshness and priced at $50 each. The listing called them organic keratin supplements, with claimed health benefits for hair and nails. Horror was the universal reaction from potential buyers. When asked if this was serious, complete seriousness was confirmed with confidence. People noted fingernails aren't food and can't be consumed safely, but the seller argued keratin is keratin regardless of source. Digestibility was questioned. Fingernails can't be digested by the human stomach. Insistence that the body would somehow absorb it through the digestive system was contradicted by doctors online, who confirmed this was medically false. Arguments that doctors were being overly conservative led to claims about ancient practices using keratin, though sources for these practices couldn't be provided. Health authorities shut down the operation immediately after investigation. Investigation followed quickly. A $2,000 fine was issued for severe health violations. Sales, 0, despite all efforts. Bags of fingernails remained in storage. Relisting attempts on other platforms resulted in universal bans before any sales could occur. The Stupidity was trying to sell fingernail clippings as supplements for $50, arguing with doctors, getting fined $2,000, being banned from all platforms and making no sales. 12. A person tried to sell invisible art for $10,000, claiming the buyer needed imagination to see it. An online listing with intentionally no photos claimed to sell invisible art for $10,000. The invisible masterpiece required imagination and open-mindedness to perceive properly. Photo requests were met with explanations that cameras couldn't capture invisible art, which people noted was suspiciously convenient. Insistence that real art lovers would understand the concept was countered by questions about what it actually looked like. The answer, whatever the buyer imagined it to be, was called out as not being art at all. Arguments that it was conceptual art were called obvious scams by skeptics. Insistence on legitimacy as serious art brought art critics who publicly confirmed it was nothing but a scam. Claims that critics lacked vision and were gatekeepers protecting traditional art didn't change the price staying at $10,000. One serious inquiry came in from a curious person, the concept was explained in detail, and the person laughed, saying it was clearly a joke. A price drop to $5,000 didn't help attract buyers. An artist website was created for $300 with posted philosophy about invisible art and perception. Still nobody bought despite the professional presentation. Investment, $300 in the website. Revenue, $0. The Stupidity was trying to sell invisible art for $10,000, insisting buyers needed imagination, spending $300 on a website and making no sales. 13. Someone tried to sell a cursed doll for $5,000 after buying it for $5 at a garage sale. A regular $5 doll from a garage sale was deemed cursed after purchase. An elaborate backstory was invented involving previous owners who suffered misfortune. The listing price jumped to $5,000 based on the curse story. The detailed description of the curse claimed nighttime movement when nobody was watching. Requests for proof of supernatural activity were met with claims that cameras didn't work near the doll due to interference. Suspiciously convenient for something unprovable. Insistence on authenticity included stories of strange occurrences like creaking doors and cold spots. which people noted houses naturally experience. Arguments about suspicious timing of these events were called confirmation bias by skeptics. Claims that believers would understand the truth attracted horror collectors who investigated and declared it a regular mass-produced doll. Insistence that collectors didn't sense its supernatural energy kept the price firm at $5,000 without negotiation. A YouTube video was created showing the doll sitting motionless for hours, which supposedly proved the curse. The doll was camera shy, according to the seller. Sales, zero ever. Price dropped to $2,500 after months. Still zero interested buyers. Auction site listings were removed for violating supernatural item policies. The doll remained with the seller. Investment, $5 originally. Revenue, $0. The Stupidity was trying to sell a $5 doll for $5,000, claiming it was cursed, providing no evidence, making videos of nothing happening, and making no sales. 14. A person tried to sell sticks from their yard for $25 each as natural walking sticks. Yard sticks were collected without any modification whatsoever. No sanding, no treatment, no varnishing, nothing. $25 price tags labeled them natural walking sticks that were supposedly artisanal and hand-selected. People pointed out sticks are free everywhere in nature, but insistence on special selection as premium quality didn't justify the high price. Questions about what made them premium received answers about aesthetic selection and quality control, which people noted wasn't worth $25. Arguments that craftsmanship mattered fell flat when people pointed out zero craftsmanship was actually involved. Claims that selection itself was a form of craftsmanship were universally rejected as nonsense. 50 sticks were listed online with photos. Zero sold at any point. A price drop to $15 per stick didn't help improve sales. Local craft markets were attended where people openly laughed at the booth selling unmodified sticks. Public embarrassment followed as vendors nearby joined in the mocking. The sticks went home unsold after the market. Online craft marketplace applications were rejected with feedback that this wasn't craftsmanship. Investment. Time spent collecting and listing. Revenue, $0. The sticks were eventually burned in a fireplace. The Stupidity was trying to sell yardsticks for $25 each, calling them artisanal, taking them to markets, being laughed at publicly, and making no sales. 15. Someone tried to sell pre-chewed gum for $20 per piece, claiming it saved time. Chewed gum was deemed valuable in its pre-chewed state, priced at $20 per piece as a convenience product. The listing touted time-saving pre-chewed gum that was already soft and ready to chew immediately. Universal disgust followed the listing's discovery. Questions about who would buy this were answered with busy people who value time. But busy people don't buy used gum from strangers. Insistence on practicality claimed chewing takes valuable time that could be saved. When told chewing takes only seconds, arguments that seconds accumulate over time didn't overcome the fundamental gross factor. Claims that hygiene was secondary to convenience in modern life brought health department intervention. Orders to stop immediately were met with free speech arguments about selling anything. Health violation fines totaled $500 for attempting to sell used items for consumption. Zero sales occurred despite listings. Court challenges to the fine failed when the judge sided with health officials, adding $200 in court costs. The Stupidity was trying to sell pre-chewed gum for $20, claiming it saved time, being fined $500 by health departments, paying $200 in court costs, and making no sales. 16. A person tried to sell lucky lottery tickets that already lost for $10 each. Lost lottery tickets were collected and listed at $10 each as lucky losing tickets, with a unique theory. The claim, losing was actually lucky because it statistically meant the next ticket purchased would be more likely to win. Questions about how losing could possibly be lucky received probability-defying explanations that ignored basic statistics. People noting that's not how probability works mathematically were told. Gamblers understood the system intuitively. Actual gamblers confirmed they knew better than this nonsense. Arguments about a proven system based on loss patterns were called obvious scams. Cultural claims about valuing loss as preparation for success prompted requests to name which cultures believed this, which went unanswered. 100 losing tickets were listed with detailed descriptions. 0 sold at the asking price. A price drop to $5 per ticket didn't help attract buyers. Gas station sales attempts where lottery tickets are normally sold resulted in being asked to leave the premises. Original ticket investment, $200 spent on tickets that lost. Revenue, $0 from resale attempts. Total loss, $200 completely. The stupidity was trying to sell losing lottery tickets for $10, claiming losing was lucky, spending $200 on tickets, being asked to leave gas stations and making nothing. 17. Someone tried to sell their old used tissues for $30 per box, claiming they had character. Boxes of used tissues were listed for $30 each, described as having character from previous use that supposedly added artistic value. Utter repulsion was the universal reaction from everyone who saw the listing. Questions about why anyone would buy used tissues were met with claims that collectors exist for everything imaginable. People strongly disagreed that collectors exist for used tissues specifically. Insistence on niche markets for everything was countered by people saying this crossed basic hygiene lines. Arguments that art is subjective and context matters in valuation didn't make used tissues art. Health authority intervention shut down the operation after reports. Investigation followed swiftly. Biohazard violation fines reached $1,500 for attempting to sell biological waste. Sales, 0, despite the listings being active. An appeal was filed arguing artistic freedom, and it was denied by the appeals board, costing an additional $300 in fees. The stupidity was trying to sell used tissues for $30 per box, calling them art, getting fined $1,500, paying $300 in appeal fees, and making no sales. 18. A person tried to sell genuine clouds captured in jars for $200 each. Jars of condensation were listed as captured clouds for $200 each, with elaborate capture stories. Claims of mountain climbing and special techniques to capture genuine clouds in their natural state were questioned immediately by skeptics. People asked how clouds could possibly be captured when clouds are just water vapor suspended in air. Insistence that these were solid cloud material was called out as simple condensation from temperature changes. Arguments that it was captured cloud material in preserved form were met with scientific explanations that condensation isn't clouds. Insistence that scientists were wrong about cloud composition brought meteorologists who patiently explained cloud science in detail. Arguments that meteorologists didn't understand the mystical capture process continued despite professional corrections. Sales, 0 at the high price. Price dropped to $100 per jar. Still 0 interested buyers. $60 spent on purchasing jars, $0 earned from sales. Science museum submissions offering to donate the clouds were rejected with explanations that it was condensation. The stupidity was trying to sell clouds in jars for $200, arguing with meteorologists, spending $60 on jars, being rejected by museums, and making no sales. 19. Someone tried to sell rocks they painted gold as real gold nuggets for $500 each. Ordinary rocks were collected from outside and received coats of gold spray paint, then were listed as real gold for $500 each. Authentic gold nuggets, supposedly from prospecting adventures, were questioned for authenticity by suspicious buyers. Refusals to have them professionally tested claimed testing would cause damage to the gold, but real gold can be tested non-destructively through multiple methods. Insistence on special fragile gold that couldn't withstand testing and secret location claims about where it was found raised immediate suspicions. One person bought a nugget specifically to test it, confirmed it was painted rock through simple methods, and reported the fraud to police. Fraud charges followed the investigation. Court conviction resulted in $2,000 in fines and restitution payments to the victim. One sale brought $500 in revenue. Net loss after fines and legal fees was $500. Probation was added to the sentence as punishment. The stupidity was trying to sell painted rocks as gold for $500, being caught through testing, charged with fraud, losing $700, and getting probation. 20. A person tried to sell their expert opinion on topics they knew nothing about for $100 per consultation. A consulting business was created with zero expertise, credentials, or knowledge, offering consultations for $100 described as expert advice on any topic. Questions about qualifications and credentials were answered with vague claims of experience being the true credential. When asked what specific experience, the answer was life experience and common sense, which isn't expertise. Arguments that everyone's opinion matters equally were countered with the observation that opinions aren't worth $100 without expertise. Claims that confidence was key to being an expert were rejected. Confidence isn't knowledge or skill. Medical advice was offered despite having no training whatsoever. Legal advice was offered despite having no law degree. Financial advice was offered despite having no certifications. Advice was offered on every topic imaginable without qualification. One person paid for a consultation and received terrible advice that seemed plausible. That person followed the advice in their business and suffered significant financial damages as a result. That person sued for negligent advice and won. The lawsuit judgment: $10,000 in damages plus legal costs. Revenue from one consultation: $100 total. Net loss after lawsuit: $9,900. Consulting ban was imposed by the court. The stupidity was selling expert opinions without any expertise for $100, giving bad advice, being sued, losing $9,900, and being banned from consulting. 21. Someone tried to sell magic beans that were just regular beans for $50 per bean. Store-bought dried beans from the grocery store were deemed magical and listed for $50 each as genuine magic beans that granted wishes. Proof requests for the magical properties were deflected with claims that magic doesn't work through scientific proof. Questions about how magic works if not through proof received answers about belief being required for magic to manifest, which was noted as conveniently unprovable. Insistence that fairy tales were based on real magic from ancient times conflicted with the historical fact that fairy tales are fiction. Arguments about fiction containing hidden truth about reality didn't make grocery store beans magical. Claims of personally blessing each bean led to questions about blessing authority and credentials. The answer was self-ordination as a bean blesser with divine permission. Sales: zero at any price. Price dropped to $25 per bean. Still zero interested buyers. One bean was planted in the garden as a test, growing into a completely normal bean plant. Original bean investment: $5 for the bag. Revenue: $0. The stupidity was trying to sell beans for $50 each, claiming they were magic, providing no proof, self-ordaining as a bean blesser, and making no sales. 22. A person tried to sell bottled farts for $40 per jar. Claimed fart capture in jars with immediate sealing after release was listed for $40 as authentic bottled farts for novelty humor purposes. Disgust was the universal reaction. Questions about who would buy this were answered with gag gift buyers looking for unique items. But the price was too expensive for gag gifts that people could make themselves for free. Claims about scarcity creating value raised questions about how farts could possibly be scarce. The answer, capturing them properly is difficult and time-consuming, was countered with the observation that everyone can fart and seal jars. Arguments that not everyone bottles them properly with the right technique were met with the response that there's good reason nobody does this. Insistence on market existence somewhere for novelty items found absolutely no market anywhere. Sales: zero at the asking price. Price dropped to $20 per jar, still zero buyers interested. Novelty shop refusals to carry them followed explanations that it was disgusting. Platform bans occurred on every marketplace. $30 spent on purchasing jars for the business. Revenue: $0 from any source. The stupidity was trying to sell bottled farts for $40, insisting it was valuable novelty, being banned from platforms, spending $30 on jars, and making no sales. 23. Someone tried to sell haunted mirrors for $1,000 after buying them at thrift stores for $10. 5 old mirrors from thrift stores cost $10 each for a total investment of $50. Elaborate ghost stories were invented for each mirror involving tragic deaths and trapped spirits. Listings jumped to $1,000 each based purely on the fabricated stories. Detailed haunting descriptions claimed trapped spirits that manifested at night. Evidence requests for supernatural activity were met with claims of camera malfunctions near the mirrors due to electromagnetic interference. Though phone cameras worked perfectly for listing photos, spirits supposedly allowed listing photos only for publicity, which was suspiciously convenient for something unprovable. Claims that paranormal collectors would understand the value immediately brought actual paranormal investigators who tested the mirrors and found nothing paranormal whatsoever. Arguments that investigators scared away the spirits with their skepticism kept prices firmly at $1,000 each without any negotiation. Sales: 0 at the high price. Price drops to $500 each. Still 0 interested buyers. Paranormal convention attempts to sell in person brought mockery from serious collectors. Investment: $50 total in mirrors from thrift stores. Revenue: $0 from any sales. 5 mirrors remain in storage. The Stupidity was trying to sell $10 mirrors for $1,000, claiming they were haunted, being tested and proven false, and making no sales. 24. A person tried to sell burnt toast that looked like a celebrity for $10,000. Burnt toast that vaguely resembled someone famous in the burn pattern was listed for $10,000 with photos clearly showing burnt toast. Claims of celebrity resemblance in the burn pattern had people squinting at photos and seeing absolutely nothing recognizable. Insistence on clear resemblance to a specific celebrity and arguments about requiring the right perspective to see it were called simple pareidolia by psychologists. Claims of genuine likeness worth collecting brought extensive online mockery and ridicule. News coverage as a humorous human interest story was mistaken for serious publicity validating the listing. The price increased to $15,000 after the media attention. The toast continued aging and eventually molded. New photos were taken showing moldy toast with green spots. The listing was updated with moldy toast photos. The high price remained unchanged. Sales: 0 ever at any price. The moldy toast was eventually eaten by the seller in desperation, causing sickness and a hospital visit costing $400 for treatment. Investment: 1 piece of bread worth pennies. Revenue: $0 from sales attempts. Loss: $400 in medical bills. The Stupidity was trying to sell burnt toast for $10,000, insisting it looked like a celebrity, letting it mold, eating it anyway, getting sick, paying $400 in medical bills and making nothing. 25. Someone tried to sell moon dust that was actually sandbox sand for $500 per ounce. Sandbox sand from a children's playground was collected and placed in small vials, then listed as authentic moon dust for $500 per ounce. Claims of working for NASA as an employee and having access to genuine moon dust samples prompted credential requests met with refusals citing security clearance reasons. Authenticity certificate requests received responses about classified paperwork that couldn't be shared publicly. Immediate suspicion followed these convenient excuses. NASA was informed about the fraudulent listings and confirmed the seller didn't work there and that moon samples aren't sold to the public. Fraud investigation by authorities followed. Charges were filed. Court proceedings resulted in conviction. Fines totaled $5,000 for fraud and deception. Probation was added to the sentence. Sales: 0, despite the elaborate story. The Stupidity was trying to sell sandbox sand as moon dust for $500, claiming to work for NASA, being charged with fraud, paying $5,000 in fines, getting probation, and making no sales. 26. A person tried to sell ordinary tap water as concert venue water for $50 per bottle. Concert attendance led to bathroom tap water being bottled in the venue restroom and listed for $50 as authentic concert venue water with special properties. Questions about why venue location mattered for tap water received answers about concert energy infusion from the music and crowd. Scientific rejection that water doesn't absorb energy from events was met with insistence on vibe transference through resonance. Arguments that collectors would understand the value of experience-infused water ran into the fact that venue water collectors don't exist anywhere. Claims of creating an entirely new market for location-specific water yielded no actual buyers. Price dropped to $25 per bottle. Still no buyers interested. Concert sales attempts outside the venue resulted in security removal from the property. Bottles filled for free from tap, zero money spent, $0 earned from any sales, permanent venue ban imposed. The stupidity was trying to sell tap water for $50 because it was from a concert venue, being removed by security, being banned from the venue, and making no sales. 27. Someone tried to sell professionally sneezed-on handkerchiefs for $100 each. Handkerchiefs received sneezes and were listed with $100 price tags as professionally sneezed-on handkerchiefs as a bizarre art project. Questions about what made the sneezing professional received answers about doing it for a living now as a profession. Arguments that this isn't a real profession were met with insistence it was now the seller's primary profession. Questions about who would buy this went completely unanswered. The seller genuinely didn't know the target market. Arguments about innovation and new markets starting somewhere were rejected as definitely not starting here with this product. Health department orders to stop immediately selling biological waste were met with artistic freedom arguments about expression. Biohazard designation resulted in $1,000 fines for health code violations. Sales: 0 despite active listings. Appeal filing arguing First Amendment rights was denied by the board, adding more fees to the total. The stupidity was trying to sell sneezed-on handkerchiefs for $100, calling it professional sneezing, being fined $1,000, appealing and losing, and making no sales. 28. A person tried to sell leaves they picked up from the ground for $15 each as natural art. Fallen leaf collection from the yard without any preservation or pressing resulted in $15 listings each as natural art pieces with claims of uniqueness. Arguments that leaves are free everywhere in nature were met with insistence on curation and selection mattering greatly in art. Rejections that simply picking up leaves isn't curation, or art prompted arguments that aesthetic selection itself was the art form. People disagreed that selection without creation is art. 200 leaves were listed with individual photos of each one. The leaves quickly dried and crumbled into pieces within days. New photos were taken showing crumbled brown fragments. The listings were updated with crumbled leaf photos. The same price remained. Sales: 0 at any point. Leaf pressing efforts were attempted to preserve them better, taking significant work and time but yielding no sales improvement. Craft fair applications were submitted and rejected with feedback that this wasn't crafts. Investment: time only spent collecting and photographing. Revenue: $0. Crumbled leaves were eventually swept up and thrown away. The stupidity was trying to sell ground leaves for $15 each, watching them crumble, pressing some with effort, being rejected from fairs, and making no sales. 29. Someone tried to sell signed rocks they signed themselves for $200 each. Rock collection from outside and self-signing with permanent marker led to $200 listings each as signed collectible rocks by the artist. Questions about who the artist was and why it mattered received answers about being a rock collector and artist with a vision. Arguments that this isn't famous or noteworthy were met with claims of fame being relative and subjective. Nobody knowing the seller was countered with brand-building claims about growing fame. Arguments that rocks aren't brandable items were rejected with insistence. Everything is eventually collectible with proper marketing. Persistence in listings yielded 0 sales at any price. Price dropped to $100 per signed rock, still 0 buyers. Fake Wikipedia page creation about the seller as an artist resulted in removal within hours by moderators. Fake news article creation claiming the rocks were valuable was discovered as fabricated and mocked. Investment: marker ink for signatures. Revenue: $0 from any source. Reputation: damaged among art communities. The stupidity was trying to sell rocks you signed yourself for $200, creating a fake Wikipedia page, creating fake news, damaging your reputation, and making no sales. 30. A person tried to sell lucky rabbit's feet that were actually dyed cat fur for $75 each. Cat grooming sessions produced loose fur that was collected, dyed to look authentic, and shaped to resemble rabbit's feet, listed for $75 each as genuine lucky rabbit's feet with supposed authenticity. Authenticity questions from suspicious buyers received trust requirement responses without proof. Sourcing questions about where the rabbit's feet came from got refusals to reveal sources for business reasons. One buyer purchased specifically to test it scientifically, had its DNA tested at a lab, and DNA clearly confirmed it was domestic cat fur. That person reported the fraud to authorities immediately. Fraud investigation by police followed. Charges were filed for selling fraudulent goods. Court proceedings resulted in a guilty verdict. Fines totaled $3,000 for consumer fraud. One sale generated $75 in revenue. Net loss after fines and legal costs, $2,225. Selling ban was imposed by the court as part of sentencing. The stupidity was trying to sell dyed cat fur as rabbit's feet for $75, being caught through DNA testing, charged with fraud, losing $2,925, and being banned from selling. 31. Someone tried to sell energy-infused water that sat near their Wi-Fi router for $30 per bottle. Tap water bottles were filled and placed directly next to the Wi-Fi router overnight for 24 hours of exposure, then listed for $30 each as Wi-Fi energy-infused water with electromagnetic benefits. Claims that electromagnetic energy from the router infused the water with special properties prompted scientific questions about the mechanism. Responses about emerging science studying this phenomenon didn't convince skeptics. Pseudoscience accusations were met with claims of existing peer-reviewed studies, but specific sources couldn't be provided when requested. Scientific rejection that Wi-Fi signals don't infuse water with anything was countered with vague energy arguments about everything being energy fundamentally. Insistence that believers would instinctively know the value found no believers willing to purchase. Price dropped to $20 per bottle, still no buyers whatsoever. Health food store submission attempts to carry the product were refused by all stores. Tap water used costing nothing, zero money spent on production, $0 earned from sales attempts. The stupidity was trying to sell Wi-Fi infused water for $30, claiming electromagnetic benefits, being refused by all stores, and making no sales. 32. A person tried to sell their toenail clippings as decorative crafting materials for $60 per bag. 6 months of toenail clipping collection from personal grooming sessions filled multiple bags meticulously, listed for $60 per bag as organic crafting materials with creative applications. Universal horror was the reaction from craft communities. Craft usage questions about what projects would use toenails received vague responses about creative and artistic crafts without specifics. Discussed responses from crafters were met with shell and stone comparison arguments, which people strongly and universally rejected as false equivalents. Arguments that organic materials are organic materials regardless of source didn't convince anyone that toenails were acceptable. Health authority investigation after reports followed immediately. Severe health violation fines totaled $2,500 for attempting to sell biological waste. Sales zero, despite active listings on multiple platforms. Appeal filing arguing the materials were sterile was denied by the board without consideration, adding fees to the total cost. The stupidity was trying to sell toenail clippings for $60, comparing them to shells, being fined $2,500, appealing and losing, and making no sales. 33. Someone tried to sell blessed pebbles they blessed themselves for $150 each. Pebble collection from outside and self-performed blessing rituals resulted in $150 listings each as holy blessed stones with spiritual power. Religious authority questions about credentials received responses about being deeply spiritual without formal training. Ordination questions about who ordained the seller got responses claiming direct spirit ordination from the universe, which people said wasn't real or valid ordination. Arguments about all blessings being equally valid regardless of source conflicted with what religious people actually believe about blessing authority. Commercialization arguments from the seller about religion being corrupted were hypocritical, since the seller was literally commercializing religious blessings. The irony went completely unseen by the seller. Sales, zero at the high price. Price dropped to $75 per blessed pebble, still zero buyers. Religious bookstore submission attempts to sell them were met with offense from store owners. Free pebbles collected from nature, zero investment, $0 earned. The Stupidity was trying to sell self-blessed pebbles for $150, claiming spiritual authority without credentials, offending religious bookstores, and making no sales. 34. A person tried to sell antique furniture they bought last week for 10 times the price. IKEA bookshelf purchase for $200 at the store was followed exactly 1 week later by a $2,000 online listing as antique furniture piece with historical value. Age questions from interested buyers received subjective antique definition responses. People correctly noted antiques are decades old at minimum by definition. Claims of instant character development through brief use were met with immediate IKEA recognition from knowledgeable buyers. Catalog link sharing by multiple people proved the exact identity and current price. Arguments that this specific one was somehow different were universally rejected. 1 week of use arguments as meaningful aging were called out as ridiculous. Sales, 0 at any price point. Price dropped to $1,000 after weeks. Still 0 buyers interested. IKEA return window was missed during the failed sales attempts, leaving the seller stuck with it. Antique store submission attempts to consign it brought laughter and rejection from antique dealers. The Stupidity was trying to sell IKEA furniture as antiques for $2,000, being recognized immediately by buyers, being laughed at by antique stores, and being stuck with it. 35. Someone tried to sell melted crayons as modern art for $5,000 per piece. Crayon melting on canvas using a heat gun created several colorful pieces, listed for $5,000 each as contemporary art pieces with sophistication and depth. People immediately called it what it was: melted crayons. Technique arguments about artistic process were countered with observations that children do this exact thing in elementary school art class. Intentional fine art claims were met with notes that children's crayon melting is also intentional creative expression. Art critic reviews after submission confirmed amateurish execution and lack of artistic merit. Elitist gatekeeper accusations against critics didn't change the firm $5,000 price for each piece. Sales, 0 at the high price. Price dropped to $2,000 per piece, still 0 buyers anywhere. Universal gallery rejection from every gallery submitted followed. Coffee shop submission attempts for display were also rejected by managers. Supply spending on crayons and canvases, $50 total. Revenue from sales, $0. Melted crayon art pieces remain in storage with the seller. The Stupidity was trying to sell melted crayon art for $5,000, arguing with professional critics, being rejected by galleries and coffee shops, and making no sales. 36. A person tried to sell lucky coins they found in a fountain for $200 each. Public fountain coins were taken from the water, dried off completely, and listed for $200 each as wish-blessed coins, containing the wishes of previous throwers. Charity donation identification of the fountain's purpose was met with abandoned coin arguments about finders keepers. Fountain charity collection explanations showing the fountain collected for children's hospitals were countered with finders keepers legal claims, which is literally theft of charity funds. Police were informed by fountain management about the repeated theft. Theft charges were filed against the seller. Coin return was ordered by the court as restitution. A $500 fine for theft was imposed along with 40 hours of community service as punishment. Sales, 0 coins sold before being caught. The Stupidity was trying to sell stolen fountain coins for $200, being charged with theft of charity funds, paying $500 in fines, doing 40 hours of community service, and making no sales. 37. Someone tried to sell their used soap bars for $25 each as pre-lathered convenient soap. Months of used soap bar saving from personal bathing resulted in $25 listings each as pre-lathered convenient soap, claiming time-saving benefits. Universal disgust followed from everyone. Used soap buyer questions received efficiency and time value responses about modern convenience. Hygiene concerns about shared soap were dismissed with claims that soap cleans itself through its chemical properties, which isn't entirely true with bacteria. Universal platform bans occurred across all marketplaces selling personal care items. Local in-person selling attempts met complete refusals to meet or negotiate. Old soap bars saved from the trash, zero investment, $0 earned from any source. The Stupidity was trying to sell used soap for $25, claiming it was convenient, being banned from all platforms, and making no sales. 38. A person tried to sell organic dryer lint for $40 per bag for crafting purposes. Months of dryer lint collection from laundry filled multiple bags carefully, listed for $40 per bag as organic crafting lint, with usefulness for projects. Specific use questions from potential crafters received vague craft project responses without details. Example requests for what projects specifically got insulation project answers about home improvement, but people said to just buy real insulation that actually works. Free origin arguments about the lint being free anyway conflicted with the $40 price per bag. Labor claims for collecting lint over months were rejected as not being real labor. Sales, zero at the asking price. Price dropped to $20 per bag, still zero buyers anywhere. Lint bags stored everywhere in the house. Craft store submission attempts were refused by all stores contacted. Revenue from sales, $0. The Stupidity was trying to sell dryer lint for $40, calling it organic, being refused by craft stores and making no sales. 39. Someone tried to sell snow in the summer for $100 per bag. Winter snow collection carefully stored in the freezer led to summer listings months later for $100 per bag, as genuine winter snow preserved from the season. Buyer questions about the purpose received nostalgia and novelty responses about experiencing winter and summer. Just frozen water observations were met with seasonal scarcity arguments about supply and demand economics. Freezer existence everywhere in modern homes didn't stop claims about this being special winter snow specifically. Location and timing arguments about when and where it fell convinced absolutely nobody of value. Sales, zero at any price. Slow freezer melting over months produced water in bags eventually. Months of valuable freezer space used. Electricity wasted on storage, zero revenue generated. The Stupidity was trying to sell snow for $100, having it melt into worthless water, wasting freezer space and electricity for months and making no sales. 40. A person tried to sell mystery boxes that were just empty boxes for $50 each. Empty cardboard boxes were listed for $50 each as genuine mystery boxes, with mystery claimed as the actual product being sold. Content questions from curious buyers received genuinely unknown responses about the mystery being unknown. Anything inside questions got uncertain, maybe responses without commitment. Nothing sound observations from skeptics were met with Schrödinger's cat principle arguments about quantum superposition, which isn't how quantum mechanics actually works. One curious buyer purchased to solve the mystery, opened it to find complete emptiness, and immediately demanded refunds. Mystery delivery claims about delivering the experience of mystery led to small claims court lawsuits for fraud. Court loss resulted in $200 in damages and court fees ordered. One sale generated $50 in revenue. Net loss after court judgment, $150. The Stupidity was selling empty boxes as mystery boxes for $50, being sued for fraud, losing in court, and paying $150 net. 41. Someone tried to sell moldy bread as artisan penicillin for $200 per loaf. Moldy bread sitting around for weeks became medicine in the seller's mind, listed for $200 per loaf as natural penicillin source, with health benefit claims for treating infections. Horror was universal from medical professionals and regular people alike. Not medicine observations from doctors were met with penicillin from mold historical arguments about Alexander Fleming's discovery, but not from bread mold specifically. Fundamental mold equivalence arguments claiming all mold is basically the same brought public doctor warnings about the dangers. Complete ignorance of professional warnings brought swift health authority intervention and investigation. A $3,000 fine for attempting to sell contaminated food as medicine, and a cease and desist order followed. Platform attempts to relist on different marketplaces resulted in universal bans before any sales occurred. Sales, 0 loaves sold. The stupidity was trying to sell moldy bread as medicine for $200, arguing with medical doctors, being fined $3,000, being banned everywhere, and making no sales. 42. A person tried to sell haunted dolls they made themselves last week for $2,000 each. Self-made dolls crafted from scratch were claimed to be immediately haunted upon creation, listed at $2,000 each with elaborate spirit stories about instant possession. New doll haunting possibility questions received instant spirit attachment responses about supernatural entities. Proof requests for paranormal activity got feeling-based and intuition answers, which is completely subjective experience. Paranormal collector understanding claims about niche markets met obvious brand newness observations from experienced collectors. Age doesn't matter to spirits arguments about paranormal logic convinced absolutely nobody in the community. Sales, 0 at the high price. Price dropped to $1,000 per doll, still 0 buyers anywhere. Paranormal shop submission attempts were rejected by every shop contacted. Supply spending on doll making materials, $50 total. Revenue from sales, $0. Ew. The stupidity was trying to sell new dolls as haunted for $2,000, being rejected by paranormal shops and making no sales. 43. Someone tried to sell their old chewing gum stuck under tables for $30 per piece. Table-scraped gum pieces from restaurant tables were carefully collected, bagged individually, and listed for $30 per piece as historic gum artifacts from various locations. Revulsion was universal from everyone who saw the listings. Buyer questions about who would want this received future historian responses about archaeological value. Historians publicly stated they don't want used gum from random people. Future archaeologist arguments about studying modern culture were rejected by actual archaeologists. Health department intervention after disgusted reports resulted in immediate fines totaling $1,500 for biohazard violations. Cease and desist order was issued immediately. Sales, 0 pieces sold. The stupidity was trying to sell scraped gum for $30. Calling it historic artifacts, being fined $1,500 by health authorities, and making no sales. 44. A person tried to sell lucky receipts from stores for $20 each. Years of receipt saving from every purchase resulted in hundreds of listings at $20 each as lucky purchase receipts that supposedly transferred purchasing luck. Luck in receipts questions about the mechanism received successful purchase arguments about the receipt representing success, which makes absolutely no sense. Transferable luck claims through paper were universally rejected as nonsense. Trash observations from normal people were countered with documentation value arguments about records having inherent worth. Sales, 0 at any price point. Hundreds of receipts saved over years, bundling attempted in sets of 10, still 0 buyers interested anywhere. Worthless paper saved taking up space, $0 earned, eventual recycling of all receipts. The stupidity was trying to sell receipts for $20 claiming they were lucky, saving hundreds of them for years and making no sales. 45. And finally, someone tried to sell authentic chicken nuggets shaped like countries for $1,000 each. Restaurant nugget purchases led to careful shape examination searches and eventual country-resembling findings listed for $1,000 as rare geographic nuggets with collectible value. Country identification questions received interpretation-open responses, claiming the buyer could decide which country it resembled. Blob observations from skeptics looking at photos were met with clear geographic insistence about obvious shapes. Extensive online mockery from social media brought news comedy coverage that was mistaken for validation and serious interest. Price increase to $5,000 followed the publicity under the belief that media coverage increased value. Nugget rotting over weeks produced visible decay in photos. New listing photos showed decomposing food with mold. Rotting food listings brought immediate health violation reports to authorities. A $2,000 fine for attempting to sell decomposed food followed investigation. Eventual discussed disposal of the rotten nugget occurred. Original spending, $5 for the nuggets. Sales, 0 nuggets ever sold. Fine loss, $2,000 paid to authorities. Months of internet mockery and meme creation ensued, damaging reputation. The stupidity was trying to sell a chicken nugget for $1,000 because it vaguely looked like a country, letting it rot completely, being fined $2,000, becoming an internet joke, and losing money on a $5 nugget. These sales attempts prove that not everything has value, that some people have no understanding of markets, and that desperation mixed with delusion creates terrible business ideas. Every single person failed to sell their ridiculous items and often lost money trying. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed these failed sales disasters, and remember, just because you want to sell something doesn't mean anyone wants to buy it. These people never learned that lesson, and they wasted time, money, and dignity on completely unsellable items.